Hello, everyone. This is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. You are listening to another special episode of Surprisecast, where you will always be educated and entertained. Guess who is back for a second helping in terms of a good conversation? Yes, Jordan, Colan Miles, the two-piece band from Edinburgh, Scotland. Last year, we celebrated the release of their gorgeous and emotionally gripping album, Echoes of a Former Life. Since then, an EP has been released with some light and dark textures of guitar hooks and haunting sounds. They are also on the 1991 label. Anyway, they are back for round number 2 as we will discuss the impact of childhood experiences, learning how they became musicians, listen to a few tunes, and what is coming down the line for them in 2024 and beyond. Let us open the doors for Sun Shines Cold. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, W.
Hi, W.
I'm doing great. Would you like to introduce who you are and what you do in the band?
I'm Colan Miles. I play bass 6, which is more of a lead guitar, and write some lyrics and help with production when sun shines cold.
Okay. Brian Jordan, the guitarist, do some programming with the drums and the vocalist and a little bit of keyboards.
So you guys are back for round number 2. We're going to go a little bit deeper, but I want to start off with this entry kind of level question for you. And I think it's important because it gives the listener kind of a better understanding of who you are, not just as a musician, but as a person. We all take interest in things that we're passionate about. Brian, we're going to start with you. Outside of music, what other hobbies, pursuits interest you? Be specific, please. And how does it fill you up with energy and enthusiasm?
Okay, so I'm a keen runner. I sort of started running when I made a plea to myself that I would run 5K by the time I was 50. So that's 4 years ago. So I'm now sort of continue, and I'm up to about sort of 10, 12K. So that's one thing I'm passionate about. Very good for the mental health as well. We play tennis, both Colin and I, whenever we can. So in the summer, looking forward to the spring, summertime, so we can do that. I have quite a demanding job, so, whenever we can get for a run, game of tennis, and just spending time with my partner as well. So quite a busy full-on.
Who got you into tennis?
I played tennis probably from a school age. I didn't go to any lessons or anything like that. It's just something that we had a friend whose mother was a tennis coach, actually. So he got us into the local sort of tennis club, and we just took it from there. Yeah, and we've just played on and off for many years now.
Colin, what about you?
Running as well. I started running in my early 30s. Just decided it was time to shift a bit of timber, in all honesty. So started running, and I've ran at a reasonable level now for, probably the best part of 20 years. Yeah, again, like Brian, sort of 10 to 12K is a comfortable distance for me. We've ran in a few events, night runs, tunnel runs. There's a local tunnel which is in the cover of Echoes of a Former Life, disused train tunnel, and we've been on a run that went through that, and it was all lit up with trippy lighting and so on, which was good fun. Tennis, we play tennis together. We kind of took it up a little bit more seriously probably about 2 years ago. I joined the club, and we've started playing a bit more regularly. I also do a bit of mountain biking. Obviously, Peebles and surrounding area is a kind of mountain biking mecca in the UK. We hold, World Cup events, World Enduro Series. So it's prime mountain biking territory. I also do a bit of motorcycling. I passed my motorcycle test a couple of years ago. So I had my midlife crisis And yeah, enjoy that. And other than that, time with the family. Yeah, I've got a 6-year-old daughter and I've got 2 older sons. So yeah, that can be quite time consuming.
We know the environment in which we grew up in has had a big impact on us. I want to know from you, Brian, how did growing up in Scotland or another region of the world impact your work?
So Peebles is quite it's a small town, sort of like 25, 30 miles from Edinburgh, south of Edinburgh. And, and just in terms of music, there's a lack of a music scene in Peebles, a live music scene. That said, there used to be a pub called the Cross Keys who did the odd sort of like live act, but that soon stopped. I think there was new management. So I think we were sort of dabbling with sort of trying to arrange bands and stuff like that. So I think that kind of encouraged us to pick up to do it a bit more seriously and possibly play live, which we did. We did play a couple of live shows in our local town, which was very, very good fun actually at the time. Yeah, we were only 17, 18 at the time, so a lot of good times. Yeah. And I think so. Peebles in itself, it's like it's very picturesque. It's very, very scenic, and I think it plays itself to. I really do think it plays itself to the whole sort of shoegaze, dream pop, ambient sort of like vibe. It really does. You can just walk into nature, and if you've got, you're going for a walk, and you can have some nice tunes and sort of ambient tracks in your ears. It's fantastic. Yeah, so I think it owes itself to that. Yeah, definitely.
What about for you, Colin? Where did you grow up and how does it impact you?
Well, I grew up in Peebles as well. Yeah, obviously Brian and I sort of became friends in our very early teens. And I think, Peebles is, Scotland is cold, dark winters, purely and simply. Yeah, it really is. So, I mean, that kind of lends itself to the type of music that we do. And it's also very atmospheric around here. You can go for a walk and end up in a disused railway tunnel or the top of a hill, surrounded by either sheep or woodland. I mean, it's all there. So we've got that in terms of sort of creating atmosphere, etc. But because we're only sort of 25 miles from Edinburgh, we had, from a very early age, an old rickety bus that used to, there's the bus route from Peebles to Edinburgh. It takes an hour. And you'd be on this old rickety bus and you could go up and see bands. And in the early days, we were going to see, I think my first gigs were, Big Country, Tears for Fears, and The Alarm and The Cult at the Edinburgh Playhouse, all in a very short period of time when I was about 14, 15. And then The Cure very soon after. And I think then we started going to sort of rockabilly and psychobilly gigs together when Brian started driving, and there was a good group of us went through those. So I think we had this really good music scene in Edinburgh that we could go and visit. So when we started playing in our teens in a 4-piece band called Breeze, basically we really had a good idea of how we wanted to sound at that stage. Before Oasis had even dreamt of picking up their guitars, we had 2 warring brothers in the band, myself and Ben. So yeah, Peebles, it was good for us. It was a good town to grow up in.
Family members, relatives, coaches, teachers can play a significant role during our upbringing. Brian, I want to know from you, who had a major impact on your life and why?
Okay, I wouldn't say there was much of a sort of supportive role from anyone outside. I was very much in a kind of family unit. Parents were very, very supportive with anything that I did. From a kind of music point of view, it was when I taking guitaring a bit more seriously back then. They were very, very supportive, and just family. I think family life was just very, very much an impact and very supportive. And my father was. I do remember on a Sunday morning that, maybe feeling a little bit hungover, and my dad, it seemed to be his sort of like his me time on a Sunday morning, and all I would hear was something like, the Carpenters, playing in the background, or Simon Garfunkel, that sort of thing. So, and of course, just growing up as well from from musical influences. My brother, I'm the youngest of three. My brother, the middle one, he was into his punk, so he was into the Jam and Stiff Little Fingers and Sex Pistols and that at the time. And then, of course, my sister was a bit more into the new romantic, so she was into all the Depeche Mode and The Cure and that sort of thing, So, yeah, just a collection of the family, really. It was very, very supportive.
That's wonderful to hear, Brian, because with some of the artists that I've interviewed over the past 2 or 3 years, obviously they don't come from that experience. Hard times with their parents, divorced parents, maybe a deceased father or mother. So it sounded like you had a pretty normal, loving childhood experience. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, and what about you? Who had an impact on your life when you were growing up?
Well, like Brian, I mean, my family were always pretty supportive and always had, they had the sort of separate music system in the living room, and they played. They used to play quite a lot of music, from Beatles through Manfred Mann, Simon and Garfunkel, all that sort of stuff. The sort of big influences for me were my grandfather. He was a jazz piano player when he came out of the army after the Second World War, and was played in a lot of big bands, jazz big bands, and toured the UK. Was on early radio shows in the 40s and 50s. And yeah, he always encouraged me. He said, look, if you want to get involved in music, it's a great thing to do. And he really was an excellent pianist. He was, I remember going into my grandparents' house, and he'd be playing, sitting at the piano playing Sweet Georgia Brown. And it's just, amazing. Absolutely amazing. And another reasonable influence was also I played cello at high school. Well, started in primary school actually, and gave up in high school because I decided that the bass was far cooler. But yeah, bass seems cooler in your teens. The cello in your 50s is probably cooler. But there you go. But my cello teacher, a guy called Jeffrey Rimmer, he was always very encouraging, and he kind of took a punt on me, because he could have picked anyone from the whole of what's called primary 5. So there was about 60 kids auditioned, and he took a punt on me, and all I did was sing along to a few piano notes, and he decided that I was the right man to learn cello. So yeah, the fact that I picked up and learned the cello is probably the reason that I'm now playing bass.
You're the third artist that I've spoken with that has a great appreciation what their grandfather has done and impacted. I love it. Thank you. Okay, Brian. I grew up listening to Thompson Twins, Mode, New Order, etc. Can you please tell me about some bands that really impressed you whilst growing up? And how do they impact, if they do at all, impact your work today?
Okay, I too grew up listening to. My sister was quite into the Thompson Twins and Depeche Mode at that time, yeah. But I think when I really got into music, I was very much. I remember this kind of transition, because I was very much into my BMX at the time. I was never off my BMX bike, But then there was obviously this time where music became a little bit more important than my bike, yeah. So there was, I guess, again, from influences from my brother. I think one of the first concerts I went to was the Jam. It was a gift tour in Edinburgh. Again, this is probably just off the influence of my brother, but at the time there was a little bit of a mod movement within in people. So we were, yeah. So, but then further on, a couple of years later, probably I was very into there was an album in particular, and it was One Eye Jacks from Spear of Destiny, that really kind of resonated with me. And also around about that time was the Cramps, Off the Bone. And it just, that really got me into probably like just listening to music and how it was actually, the song structure was, and how it sounded, and how did it sound the way it was. And of course, what's quite interesting about these two bands is they both play with one of the big orange, like, semi-hollow, the Gretsch, that like Poison Ivy played, and also Kurt Brandon from Spear of Destiny played. And again, so then that kind of progressed, and a lot of the kind of rockabilly, a lot of the psychobilly bands, again, had that kind of like that kind of sound and heavy reverb as well, which is quite interesting, because when you can now get into the shoegaze kind of era, it's like it's very heavily reverbed, So yeah, that was my kind of like growing up into sort of now, and I must admit, of any of the sort of genres that I was into, I think shoegaze has probably been the one that has stuck the most. And then just having all these sort of directions from that kind of shoegaze era, like sort of post rock, and they've stayed with me for many years now. So yeah, it's obviously a genre that's very close to my heart, actually.
Sometimes I get jealous when I ask my guests that question, because I hear bands that I would love to have seen. And you mentioned the Jam, which I'll never get that opportunity. So lucky for you.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, kind of early bands I saw were Tears for Fears, the Cult, Big Country, etc. But bands I was heavily into listening to in my teens were, the Tears for Fears, I suppose, originally when I was very young. Then Japan, David Sylvian, Richie Sakamoto, Teardrop Explodes. And then obviously got very heavily into The Cure via a work colleague that I worked with, which I think will come to in a later question. But also Depeche Mode. But Depeche Mode, I was never really that into the earlier synth pop stuff. It was more Songs of Faith and Devotion, Violator, that really resonated with me. Although now, when I've seen them live very recently, twice, Bratislava and Glasgow, and yeah, when they play the synth pop stuff, it's amazing, because everybody starts jumping about and enjoying themselves instead of getting into the deep, moody black celebration. So yeah, Susie and the Banshees. In the end, then obviously we did go through the sort of psychobilly, rockabilly phase together with a group of friends. We got quite into that. And then we were lucky enough that there was a venue in Edinburgh called The Venue, where we did see these bands, but then they started putting on early incarnations of Blur, The Verve, Slowdive. So we saw Blur on their very first album, which was intrinsically a shoegaze album. Then we saw The Verve, and there was only about 20 people in there. And this was pre-album Verve. So it was the EPs. Personally, when The Verve started doing albums, I wasn't really a massive fan, but I was a big fan of, Gravity Grave and, She's a Superstar, all these kind of tracks. So yeah, The Verve, and obviously Slowdive as well. Slowdive played The Venue. So yeah, fantastic times. And yeah, those are the bands that I think resonated with me. And I think the sound that we've derived probably comes from a mix of, post-punk, Cure influenced bass lines, Banshees influenced bass lines, shoegaze, and obviously post-rock, which we've got far more into latterly with the likes of Godspeed, Mogwai, and Explosions in the Sky, who we're hoping to go and see in a couple of months.
The enthusiasm in both of your voices, listing those bands, so good, so good. Let's move on. Brian, I remember watching the movie Chaplin. There's a great scene where Chaplin finds the bowler hat, oversized shoes, and a cane. At that moment, he became the little tramp. When and how did you realize you were going to become highly involved in the arts, particularly music?
I think, it's to be sort of highly involved. It's quite difficult to hold a sort of full-time job. I mean, it's something. I mean, I would absolutely love to be doing music as a full-time job or music production. It's just something that, it's one of these jobs that someone will ask you. It's like, if you weren't doing your current job, what else would you do? Well, it would be that. There's no doubt about that. And I think, as Colin was saying, that, seeing all these sort of bands playing live, and you get that kind of, like, especially when you were younger, you get that kind of, feeling that it was like, I can maybe do that. Do you know what I mean? And when you're kind of tinkering around with, when we used to jam together, just with the bass and the guitar, it's just like, it was like, oh, we could play locally and then just see where it goes from there, So again, as I say, I would love to do this sort of full time. It's it's obviously not a full time job at the moment, and we try to get some time for our music together as much as we can. And yeah, it's only probably about 3 years now that we have taken it a wee bit more. 4 years ago that we did sort of take it a bit more serious. We had quite a long gap of maybe, like, there was a break of probably 10 years, I would say, from our teens, and then getting back together, that we're both passionate about it, and we kind of want to continue. So,
Colin, did you have that defining moment where you realized, okay, I really want to put my attention towards music?
Well, yeah, we were always interested in going to see bands, as we've discussed. And then when we were in our teens, we formed Breeze and played live a few times. And Breeze felt right. Breeze could have continued on. We enjoyed it. We had a good sound. We wrote all or the majority of our own material. We only played a couple of covers. We played Ride Taste and Zanetti and Nothing Can Stop Us. And those were the only two covers we played. And yeah, we kind of had a good feeling, but unfortunately things conspired against us. We're moving in different directions. Rehearsal rooms burned down. So amps got destroyed, drums got destroyed. And yeah, then we all sort of moved into different areas, got into different relationships. But I think when Brian and I were in our early 30s, I was going through a fairly difficult period in terms of where my life was with relationships and, bad habits. And yeah, we kind of got together and started just playing again. And we realized that what we were playing was, sounded really nice, sounded particularly sad, but very, very atmospheric. And, we knew who we were influenced by, because by that stage, obviously, the Cure and Slowdive and, Spiritualized, etc., had been parts of our lives for a long, long time. So, yeah, I think it was in our 30s when we started writing, probably in earnest, as a duo. And yeah, as I say, it took a long time for us to actually consider releasing anything. But we've got a back catalogue of lots of demos. But to tell you the truth, we don't revisit. We've not gone back the way and picked any of those as new tracks that we're going to release, because I think now we feel we've sort of progressed and we're writing better tunes.
Brian, working with children at a busy after-school daycare center gave me invaluable experience on how to connect with them and understand their vastly different learning styles. How and what earlier jobs in your life gave you the tools to navigate your way through this musical experience?
Yeah, so one of my first jobs, and I think around about that time, so it was printed circuit boards. I used to manufacture printed circuit boards back in the time, and if I remember, it was actually for tannoy speakers, which didn't mean much to me at the time, and apparently they're very, very good speakers. But I guess back then it was like your kind of first job was really about getting money, and so that you could go and see bands. That was it. And then perhaps getting enough money to buy your guitar and a distortion pedal and an amp. It's kind of like that was all we needed. So yeah, I think, yeah, and Colin had mentioned the venue called The Venue in Edinburgh, and yeah, it was very much getting the money together to go in and see these bands in Edinburgh, which at that time it was like there was probably one decent band just about every week or every fortnight that we would see.
What about you, Colin? Any earlier jobs that really benefited you today as a musician?
Well, in my late teens, when I left school, I worked in a fashion shop in Peebles, selling Levi jeans and tops, etc. And the chap I worked with, a guy called Alan Foster, known as Foss, was a Robert Smith lookalike. Came into work, hair all crimped up, dyed jet black. Really, really sort of cool guy. And within that shop, all we did all day was listen to the Banshees, The Cure, Stranglers, Joy Division, New Order. That was it. That was all you did. And obviously, if someone came in to buy something, it was like, wait, just now you're interrupting a good tune. But the beauty of that job was that it gave us the time and it gave us the money, but it gave, the time to actually get practice. We weren't commuting in those days. So that allowed us, if you're finishing at 5 o'clock, grab a quick bite to eat, get into the rehearsal room, practice, and, we were probably jamming a couple of times, 2 or 3 times a week in those days.
Yeah.
And I think that's what set us up. When you say navigating music industry, that kind of set us up, that we had that time to practice. I wouldn't say earlier jobs, because our careers weren't really in the music industry, help us sort of with how we manage, how we release music now, or how we produce music now. But they certainly have helped set us up as the people that we are now, in terms of the music that we do and how we first started doing it.
My principal, my boss, Lynette, gave me a lot of freedom as a teacher. She would show up to my non-academic events to support my students in the way that I approached kind of unorthodox teaching. I always felt that she was in my corner. Who took a chance on you in the formative years, and how were they instrumental in helping you break into the scene? Basically, who can you thank?
Again, there's no real one person sort of out with. Again, I'm just going to go back to the whole family unit again, because again they were really, really supportive. Yeah, there wasn't that kind of one person. Even like at school, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't overly like academic at school. And school, it was a chance to leave school, I guess, when I could. So there wasn't a sort of teacher that really inspired me to perhaps take up music, or it's something. Obviously, when you look back, I wish I'd studied music at school. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But again, I just think, thanks to my father. Obviously, he's not with us anymore, but just thanks for the support and the whole family, like during the sort of early years. Yeah.
Colin, what about you? Who took a chance on you?
Well, as discussed, my cello teacher was the first one to take a chance on me musically, and stuck with me till I pretty much got bored of it and decided that, as I say, the bass was the cooler route to go down. But obviously, from then, I worked in a pub called the Keg in Peebles, and we played our first live gig there. And the guy that owned it, a guy called Roddy Mackay, he was very supportive, let us use the PA system, allowed us to use the room. And yeah, I mean, it was packed, people on tables, standing up at the back to see her. And we played during the local Beltane Festival, which is, one of these silly Scottish pagan things that, the kids all do fancy dress, and they get on, the adults get on horses and ride round the town's boundaries. But on the Thursday night, there's not a great deal on. So Breeze took to the stage, and he gave us the opportunity to do so. And then we also played the local arts festival a year later on. And I'm trying to remember the surname of the guy, but his name was Richard. But he persuaded us to play, and we played a much bigger gig than the Keg in a much bigger environment. And, we got paid very good money for doing it. And that kind of, made us realize that we could do something in music. And, it was a real buzz at the time. But unfortunately, not long after that, as I say, things changed. Rehearsal rooms burnt down, etc. But those two guys and my cello teacher took a punt on us. But more recently, obviously, when we started releasing music, I would say that the people that have helped us break into more people hearing us are, the DKF, Greg, Simon Leclerc, people like Vinca that have supported us all the way, Greg and Brett at Eardrum Buzz, Rick Bourgeois at Big Sonic Heaven, and yourself. It's you help get us out there, and these things make a difference. There's no doubt about it.
Brian, as a professional educator for over 20 years, I often received critical or positive feedback for my work, all of which helped me become a better teacher for elementary school children. What have you been told about a strength or weakness of yours as a musician that impacted the way you approach your work? Be honest, and can you cite an example?
Well, this is quite an interesting question, because Colin might roll his eyes at that. The whole approach to, I must admit, when we were putting the album together, for me, things got quite intense. And I think that's probably due to the fact that one of my strengths is probably like, I do like to get near as perfection as possible. And I think we kind of put a time limit on getting the album out. So it was like, sometimes I was feeling a little bit pressured to actually get that out in time, and therefore there was a little bit of a compromise as to what I sort of strived for, perfection and something to actually sound right, in my ears, So that's something, and I totally understand that you have to compromise, and you have to have targets, and you have to have time limits and that sort of thing. So yeah, for me, strengths, I probably, maybe I'm too much of a perfectionist. I'm not sure of whether that's a strength or a weakness in some people, but yeah, certainly on the lead up to the release of the album, it was a trying time, I would say.
You're not the only artist that has shared with me about perfectionism and how that helps and hinders that working experience. So you're not alone there. Colin, what about you? What have you been told about a strength or weakness of yours?
Well, sometimes I try and make it a little bit more difficult than it should be. I think baseline wise, particularly when we're doing post rock, I can try and sort of, make it probably a little bit more intricate than it has to be. Whereas sometimes it can be quite simple, but there's other times where you can do something so simple. And there's one track that we worked on for the new album where the bass line, and the track was supposed to be post-rock. It's turned out not particularly post-rock, but the bass line is very post-rock. And the bass line of that is very intricate, but also simple. And that to me is a win-win when you can do that. It sounds very intricate, but it's all in the intonation, which makes it that way. But yeah, production-wise, that is a weakness of mine. And obviously, yeah, Brian, as he says, probably did feel more pressured than me because I'm not as involved in the production. I assist, and obviously in terms of the mixing, etc. But yeah, in terms of sort of building the composition, we might start with, for some of the tracks, with a bass line. When we're together, a bass line and a guitar line, we'll lay down the bass line, and then Brian will go away and build the composition, which really is the time-consuming part of what we do. So for me to start turning around and saying to people, yeah, the album's going to be out in 6 months, I now fully appreciate the pressure that put Brian under, and the album was not out in 6 months. Yeah, I think the sort of strength of Brian and the production side of things is a great thing, and I have to give him credit for that. I assist in production, and I don't kid on that I'm heavily involved in it. That is something that Brian puts a lot of time and energy into.
Brian, there are challenges that come with any job. What part of being a musician does not come naturally for you? Writing lyrics, music theory, performing live? Let us know your vulnerabilities.
Yeah, definitely writing lyrics for me. It's just something that really not, although I'm kind of like the lead guitarist or, rhythm guitarist. Yeah, it's just something that hasn't really come natural to me. And I don't know why I've kind of like went along got kind of involved and listened to a lot of post-rock, or we write sort of more post-rock tunes, because there generally isn't a lot of vocals in post-rock tracks. But maybe that's the direction I want to take us, because I don't want to write or sing lyrics. I mean, vocally, to be honest with you, I don't mind. I don't mind singing.
You're a good singer.
As long as and I think it's, again, that's another area that could probably be improved, to be quite honest with you. And again, obviously, I'm a self-taught guitarist, and I wish I'd probably studied music. I mentioned this before, but I wish I'd really studied music, to a professional sort of level. Another thing, the concept of performing live, I mean, I think that must be absolutely incredible to play in front of, a fairly sized audience, even a small gig, and I do have this kind of I just have this kind of sound, or this, just, yeah. So yeah, just get on the concept of playing live. Obviously, that just sounds absolutely fantastic. At this particular moment, it kind of terrifies me. I don't know if that's a thing of getting older and you just become a little bit, self-conscious. I don't know. But I guess the more you do it, it's one of these things that if you play live and you enjoy it, you're going to do it again. So I guess if we get out there and we do it and we enjoy it, then, we'll do it again.
I used to talk to my students about performing because that was always a challenge for them. And I used to tell them, when they find that moment where the audience is in their hands, I want them to describe it to me afterwards. And you should see some of these kids' faces and what that meant. So, Brian, I'm going to challenge you for when you play live and that moment happens. I want you to message me and be like, this is... Colin, what about you? What are some challenges being a musician that doesn't come naturally for you?
Music theory for me. I never held any interest, even though I was, partially sort of classically trained with the cello. It just really held no interest whatsoever. I'm kind of prefer the freedom of doing what sounds right and what sounds good. So I would say theory for me. Performing live, I'm quite keen on, but I know that there are challenges with it, particularly as a two-piece. And yeah, in terms of writing lyrics, I quite enjoy that process. But so that the challenge for me, or the difficulty for me, is probably music theory more than anything else.
Let's start taking a deeper dive into Sunshine's Cold music. Brian, why do you think Sunshine's Cold music resonates with people? Because we know there seems to be a plethora of bands in the realm of shoegaze, dream pop, post-rock dream pop, ambient. So what is it about SSC that speaks to people, and why?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I hope it does resonate with people, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously we've got some good feedback from the album. Although it's like, it's quite difficult to sort of pigeonhole Sunshine's Cold. It's like, you know, I think we're quite heavily influenced by shoegaze, but I don't think some of our tracks are that heavily shoegaze. But then, you know, shoegaze is such a big spectrum, really. You know, it's you know, you can have, you know, your ambient side and your dream pop and all that kind of side, you know, and then you can have the links to post rock. So I'm just hoping the album, perhaps, you know, the interest we've had is really that, you know, there's an influence there from all the influence from all our childhood sort of like people that we've listened to bands that we've listened to over the years. It's just kind of like thrown into that mix, and I think there's something there for everyone who is kind of involved in all that kind of like, you know, and likes to listen to all that kind of dream pop, post punk, post rock, shoegaze, ambient, whatever genre. Yeah.
Colin, can you piggyback off of what he just said? Why do people respond to your music?
Yeah, I think a lot of what people have been saying more recently, I mean, Mark Anderson, who again has been very supportive from DKFM, and he made a comment that, you know, it's very sad, but it also has an optimistic tinge to it. And I think that is the thing, you know, you know, you can talk about major and minor and your chords and your the type of music that you're doing. And now we're going into theory, which I'm not going to go there as per previous question. But yeah, I think that resonates with people. You've got this sadness, but with an optimistic edge to it, or an optimistic end to it in some cases, with some of our tracks. But I think it's the interesting part for me is the fusion, because alluding to what Brian said and piggybacking what he said, it's this blend of shoegaze, post-rock and post-punk. I think if you're going to pigeonhole us, it's that we blend those three elements, which as do, you know, Last Tourist as well. And I think that's why we, you know, like what's going on at 91, get on very well with Last Tourist, particularly John Welby, is that we have a similar ethos and we have a similar outlook on the music that we're doing and producing. And it is that we're not outright shoegaze. We have a bit of psych, we have a bit of post-punk, we have a bit of post-rock, and there's, all those elements come together to create the noise that we make.
There's a lot of confidence in the way that both of you just spoke about who you are as a band and why you think your music resonates. Brian, in our careers, it's important to find ways to enhance our skills in order for growth and development to happen. Since the song 45 all the way up to until the end, how do you feel like you're growing as a musician, and in what areas?
Yeah, I think probably across the board, really. You know, from song structure. You know, if I'm sort of writing down some chords, or, you know, just trying to sort of make a nice sound, you know, and blend some chords together. You know, I certainly have I feel like I'm spending more time and actually trying to structure that song, you know, rather than, you know, it's quite interesting with the whole kind of post-rock kind of side of it as well. It's not your standard, you know, song structure, you know, it's not your intro, your verse, your chorus, what have you, yeah. So certainly that in song structure, I'm kind of, you know, I'm more aware of. I think that's probably what I'm trying to say. In terms of vocals, I really want to have more of a melody in my vocals. I want to try and make it a catchy sort of melody, whether it be kind of haunting vocals or whether it be sort of dreamy vocals, you know. But certainly just to try and, I think it's just more about thinking more about what we're doing and song structure and the sound. And certainly when it comes to sound, trying to improve that guitar sound, I've always always have this kind of this sound that I have in my head that seems to be very, very difficult to emulate. It's it's like I may hear it on another track and I'm like, oh, that's on someone else's track, and I might think, oh, that's a great sound. To try and actually emulate that sometimes is pretty difficult for me. I don't know if that's for other musicians, and just to end on that, it's just the whole production side of it as well, that just taking a little bit more time to actually, when it comes to the recording stage, because I think we kind of did learn that, it's really quite helpful at the recording stage to actually have a decent recording level and all these kind of things before you go to the mix. Yeah. So, to just like when we are recording anything in the future is to put a little bit more thought and effort into that side of it, so that it makes it a little bit easier later on.
What about for you, Colin? How are you growing as a musician, and in what areas?
Well, mainly in production. I mean, as I say, the production really is Brian's thing, but obviously I'm learning more and more about that as we've gone on, and realised fairly quickly that it wasn't as straightforward as potentially I thought, and there's a huge amount of work goes into it, which I'm now more than happy to assist with, and I've taken a lot more time in the final days of the album, where I would go up to Brian's, and I wouldn't even take any instruments. I would just go up and we would just sit for hours just working on the final mixes of the tracks. So I think that is an area where we've obviously improved, but also rehearsing live. It's given us a kind of new way of working. We're solidly, we might play, There Came a Rain 8 times until we feel that it's absolutely perfect while we're rehearsing, or before, or Floods or whatever. But at the same time, it's given us a way of, when you finish sort of working on a track that you're rehearsing live, you start just, playing away at different things. Brian and I have always just sort of sat down and worked on tracks in a fairly steady way, that, we would, sit and write in a room, sitting down comfortably, but doing it in a stand-up rehearsal environment is different. You get much more of a feel of how you can push a track and how a track can progress. So I think that's something new to us that we're finding quite interesting at the moment.
I love to write, and often wondered, what would it be like to write lyrics and attach music to create a mood? Would anyone like to share some lyrics that you're very proud of, and from what song?
I think, a lot of the lyrics that we've sort of come from or write come from a period in your life, or a relationship, or, in our case, failed relationship. We don't tend to have that many happy tracks. Something that's got a bit of a backstory that fits the mood of the track, basically. So, from my perspective, there's an early track that we released called Alone. And Alone, if you read the lyrics are available on Bandcamp, but if you read the whole thing, it's really about the kind of degeneration of someone's life and kind of mental health going through the breakup of a relationship. And not that I was ever, or Brian was ever, as bad as probably the lyrics in this particular track, but they are very poignant. And I think there's the final verse in that track, in which the lyrics are: stripped me, you left me torn, dignity no longer adorned, here voices dirt is thrown, once again I'm on my own. That is basically sort of signifying the end of a relationship, but the dirt being thrown, it's kind of end of life as well, in a sense. So that, and there's also lyrics from Tried So Hard, and again it's the final verse in Tried So Hard, which, if I can just get to them, It's cast the stone, my demons, they are my own. In you we trust, just not enough for both of us. And that's kind of, signifying that, when you're in a relationship that's not working, it's who's to blame, and you're always looking, is it me to blame? Is it the other person? And that's kind of where those lyrics, or how those lyrics came about.
Time to change today. No feelings left. Time to walk away. Tried so hard.
Yeah.
Very poignant, sharp, impactful lyrics. Thank you for sharing. You've written some incredible, infectious songs. Do you mind if we listen to this song, Black of Beyond, and can you give an analysis? Let's take a listen to this track. Love, love, love this song. Brian, do you want to give us a little detail on Black or Beyond?
Yeah, I just going back actually, it's a few years now actually. So just going back when I was listening to that, it just there was some guitar riffs and some guitar sort of like and the structure in that was very much to do with. I was listening to a lot of This Will Destroy You at that particular time, and a lot of like just post rock tracks, particularly the self-titled album and Young Mountain, which I just think are absolutely fantastic albums. So and also a little element of Interpol as well. I think it was in the bridge. The guitar was a little bit of Interpol. So again, it's just one of these sort of like tracks that, you know, it's just bringing all these influences from our childhood or just growing up and throwing it into the mix. Yeah.
Colin, what do you have to say about this song?
I like it. It's probably one of the more sort of gothic-y songs on the album. You know, it's got that sort of dark side to it. I think initially it started with post-rock riffs, but it's got quite a heavy post-punk bass line. It's not a hard bass line. It's a relatively simple bass line, but, you know, it's strong in the way it sort of, you know, it goes down. It has that sort of goth post-punk sound to it. So from that perspective, we kind of fused that post-rock, post-punk, almost goth element together. And, you know, the way the guitar's soaring it as well, particularly in the outro. And the outro is the sort of build-up of 2 or 3 guitar parts with the bass line still sort of thundering away in the background. And it has that sort of soar, which gives it that shoegaze side of things. You know, the outro, it certainly becomes much more shoegaze than the intro, because the intro is very post-punk goth. And lyrically, it's pretty dark as well, but it's strange because we start, you know, the chorus is sung, then there's a verse, then there's the chorus. So it's a complete, you know, the formula for it is out the window. It really is.
Okay, Brian, live shows, concerts. Talk to us about that.
Okay, so obviously it's something that we're thinking about. You know, it's quite interesting because when we were younger, you know, I had a mass array of pedals. Now, over the years, they've just kind of disappeared. You know, I have some of them, and then, of course, the whole sort of like using a MacBook with Logic with lots of plugins and thing then became, you know, the way that we would kind of produce our music. And so I'm kind of in the process of just trying to build that up again. So, and then I would like to obviously like play that live. At the moment, we're, you know, obviously we're tinkering with it. We're thinking about playing live, but for me, I'll be honest with you, it's a little bit long away at the moment, but you know, it's certainly in the back of our minds.
Yeah, I mean, we're rehearsing quite regularly, really. We're rehearsing every couple of weeks, which is allowing us to write as well. And we're working on creating a sound. But I think the issue that Brian has is that we want to create a sound as close to the produced song as possible. And we kind of have the thought process of, if we can create a sound which is as close to the produced song and sounds great, we're not going to do it. But I think that we are getting closer to it, and I think we are, you know, beginning to sort of enjoy playing in that environment. The issue is that, you know, we can only play so many bits. I can't pick up the 6th string if I'm playing bass. Brian can't play lead if he's playing rhythm. And some of our tracks don't just have one guitar part; they've got 3 guitar parts, and they'll have a bass line as well as a 6th line. So these are the difficulties, and it's whether you have those as backing tracks or you have other musicians. Now, we've got some other musicians that are quite keen to play with us, and I think, you know, what we will do is work on getting our side of it absolutely perfect, and then we're going to move in different studio whereby we're going to involve other musicians. So we are working on it, and fingers crossed we can get there. Certainly, from my perspective, my point of view, it's something I would like to do, and I think that the songs would lend themselves to sounding good live. So yeah, the plan is to, if we can get there, hopefully before the end of the year, look at doing something. But we're not putting a time scale on it. We'd rather just get it perfect.
That's kind of a liberating approach, so you don't feel buckled in like that. I think that's pretty smart. Well, when it does happen, let us know. I might have to do a little flying. Brian, burnout can happen with any job. How do you plan on keeping this Sunshine's Cold momentum going without burning out? How do you try to keep it all together?
I think obviously friendship is the most important part here. Yeah, as long as we have that, I think that we will continue to do as long as we can. I think just that we're very, very busy people, and I think that's that's probably one of the challenges that we have is like just trying to get, things just take quite a long time, when it comes to, even if it's rehearsing, if it's even just a general sort of jam, because we used to love doing that. It's just like sitting down, pick the guitar up, pick the bass up, and just see what comes of it. And it's kind of the way we've always worked. But I think just life in general has got in the way. So, but as long as we can, we have the friendship and we make the time to get together, have a little jam, then that's where the momentum needs to. That's the challenge, to keep the momentum going.
Let's keep the momentum going with this question. Colan, what do you think?
Well, from my side of things, I think fortunately we really enjoy what we do. And we do. We enjoy it when we get together because we're good friends. We have a laugh and we enjoy, writing music. We do enjoy that process, just sitting down, as Brian says, with the guitar and bass. And now we're kind of doing it in this rehearsal room environment. It's different. And yeah, I think it works as well. But we quite like the whole chilled out thing where, summer's afternoon, sit, listen to some music, a few beers in the garden, come in, go into the little studio at the back of the house, stick on the guitar, stick on the bass, just get something that sounds right. We'll record the bass line. Brian will, maybe lay his initial guitar line. He might not. He might remember it. Go up the road and turn it in, this early element of a track. And that is kind of how a lot of our early EPs came about, just by doing that. So yeah, we enjoy it. And I think to keep the momentum going, we'll just continue to do that. I mean, our careers and lives are busy out with music. There's no doubt about it. They are genuinely very, very busy. So music's our release. Yes, we go running and other things, but at the end of the day, when we get together and have a couple of beers, if we're not listening to music, we're making music.
We're going to wrap this up with a little bit of fun time. Brian, we're going to sling and throw this question over to you first. If you were to design a very successful 2 to 3 month tour, what would that look like in terms of venues, city, opening bands? The sky's the limit with the answer.
Okay, in terms of venues, I think they would be quite small, intimate venues, and yeah, it's quite a tricky question that actually. In terms of cities, I think most cities around the UK and in Europe, if that was ever possible. I have this thing about doing a live, maybe outdoor gig, and I don't know why this is, because Scotland is not the most predictable weather, is in a Scottish island. for perhaps with a festival. Another festival that would be extremely exciting to do would be Art Tangent, which is a kind of post-rock type festival in Bristol in the UK. Just in terms of opening bands, I think we've got something similar here, but obviously just to support the 91 Records label, obviously last tour is 93 miles from the sun, and the new boy, Moon Cowboy, who you've had on your show, yeah. But we were laughing about that. But obviously, I don't think they would be opening for us. I think we would be opening for them.
Oh, yes. We have gotten in 1991 recordings. Thank you for bringing that up. Moon Cowboy, all of you guys must be so exciting right now. Colin, what about you? Give us that dream 2 to 3 month tour.
Yeah, I think tour-wise, we'd probably open in the UK, do the sort of London, Birmingham, Manchester, Glasgow thing, then go to Europe and do your more sort of, because of the nature of what we do, I think we'd probably go down quite well in your more sort of Eastern European type, countries and the capitals there. Obviously, you need to play Berlin. They love a bit of dark music and shoegaze and post-punk in Berlin. Do that. And we'd obviously want to do some stuff in the States. I think, obviously, come, San Fran, LA, Minnesota, because, we got a lot of support across there. So at the end of the day, that's an area that we would love to play. In terms of opening acts, I think if you put, Guns N' Roses or Bon Jovi on the stage, we'd just blow them away. Do you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, yeah, we'd probably just stick with playing with some of the bands from 91, in all honesty. It would be nice to, if there was up and coming bands that wanted to join us, we would obviously be highly supportive of that at the end of the day. I think young Finlay Hatton, Winter Harbour, he's producing some beautiful music at the moment. And yeah, I'm not saying that he should support us or we should support him, but it would be nice to play along with him at some point. He's quite friendly with the guys at 91 anyway. His father's pretty friendly with John Welby. And yeah, Winter Harbour, Finlay Hatton, he's one to watch out for. He's got a new EP out today and it's excellent.
I was about to hang up on this conversation had you not mentioned San Francisco. So thank you. I look forward to that one day. All righty. Curtains are about to close here. Brian, the word opus gets used quite a bit whilst describing a flawless masterpiece of an album. In your humble opinion, what are 3 flawless albums?
Very difficult question. For me, it's got to be Slowdive, Just for a Day. That's my number 1. Number 2 is Spiritualized, Laser Guided Melodies. And I'm going to go for a more recent album, a band that I almost, honestly, I just wish they would do more. It's Holy Fawn from Arizona. The album Death Smells, I think, is just absolutely fantastic.
Why did you pick that one?
I don't know. When I heard that, I think I heard I've got some of the earlier stuff, their EPs, and I just think there's quite an element of, there's quite a mix there of, like, I know there's some like black metal involved in that as well, some influences there, but some of their more kind of ambient type kind of shoegaze, there's obviously a shoegaze element there and a sort of post-metal kind of metal, black metal, whatever you want to call it. I just think it's a really, really nice blend. And even their newer album, Dimensional Bleed, is just absolutely fantastic. And every time I just wait for them to release something. It's just a band I really, really like at the moment.
Okay, sounds fantastic. Colin, what are your 3 albums?
Faith, The Cure. Now, it could be Faith, the two opuses for me are Faith and Disintegration. And I could have picked either one, but I think Faith overall probably wins because there's a couple of tracks on Disintegration as I've got older that I will skip because they're probably more poppy than I would like in terms of, because it's a dark album, but there is a couple of tracks on there that, just don't necessarily, in my head, work, whereas Faith is, a masterpiece from start to finish. As Disintegration is to a degree, but for me, I think Faith is definitely there. Secondly, I have to agree with Brian. Just for a Day is number 2. Just a fantastic album that we grew up with. It's sat in my bedroom, got high, listened to Just for a Day. It was a passage of rights. And my third choice is another Spiritualized album, which I mentioned on the last conversation, is Ladies and Gentlemen, We're Floating in Space. I just think it's such a good album. There's a couple of real tearjerkers on that album. The opening track, for a start, and it really is a fantastic piece of work.
My response would be Just for a Day. Absolutely kind of opened the doors for so many people, particularly within this genre of music. And ladies and gentlemen, if you ever want to have a conversation about that album, talk to Moon Cowboy Ricardo Fiel.
Interesting.
Yes. I thought I loved that album. Oh, no. So, Ricardo, if you're listening to this, we're going to come back to you for another conversation. Hey, you know what? This has been fabulous. Final word. What is coming down the line for Sunshine Coal 2024 and beyond?
Well, we're working on live. We'll see how that pans out. It's certainly something we would like to do. I would love to do. So we'll hopefully be looking at that towards the end of this year. We're more than halfway into the album, which is good. We've got about 5 tracks laid down, which we know are going to make the cut. We want to have we'll probably write another 5 or 6 and pick another 3 or 4. We'll go for another 8/9 track album, I think. It lends itself to, just a single piece of vinyl, because we don't really do short songs. We don't do 3 minutes. So we're not going to have 12 tracks. Our tracks tend to be 5, between 5 and 6 minutes, really. And there's a few strong tracks there. There's one in particular that I think is just massive, and it's going to be big. So, I think we've got our opening track, potentially our closing track picked, the middle track, which is the massive one, and then we've got, as I say, 5 tracks, and we'll write another 5 and pick 3 or 4 to go on the album. So that's, if we can get that out this year, great. But if we don't get it out this year, we'll definitely have it out early next year, or fingers crossed, early next year. I don't think we're that far away now. It's not like the first album where we're going to put ourselves under immense pressure. I think we're not that far away.
Brian, any additional?
Yeah, so I've kind of bought new recording equipment as well. So every time I'm like testing it out, I'm just laying down some like riffs or laying down some like a verse and a chorus for particular songs. So even on top of the album that Colin was talking about, the material we have, there's potentially a lot more there. I'm just one of these guys that, if I'm sitting, I'll pick up an acoustic guitar and I'll go for try a riff and just mess around, and then I'll go straight into my bedroom and just record what I've done, and lay it down just so it's there. So, and if I need to go back to it, and this is what happens sometimes, is that I'll maybe send Colin some stuff that I've just been working on, and it's like, yeah, that sounds good. No, I'll bin that, you know. Or he'll maybe work on a bass line, and that's kind of how it works. And, you know, so, yeah, on top of the album that Colin was talking about, I've got a lot of ideas sitting there waiting to be, you know, complete.
Sounds like there could be some more post-rock EPs.
Brian Jordan, Colan Miles, thank you. This has been a real delight. And I'm very appreciative of the friendship we've been able to form over the past year and a half. And thank you again for coming back through these doors in a podcast fashion. I'm grateful for your time. What I take away from this is obviously your love for music is very apparent. But what you said, Brian, earlier, friendship is the most important thing. And I would wholeheartedly agree based on the way that you two communicate with each other, the way that you express your appreciation for one another and what you're able to do within your job responsibilities as musicians, and the level of respect and all that good bantering and fun. So you have something very special, and I'm glad we're able to capture it on the airwaves. Thank you so much. My name is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. This has been a very special friendship type episode of Surprise Cast. Take care, everyone. You can find Sunshine Cold, Spotify, Bandcamp, you name it. Check them out. Ciao.